Akiba Leisman, CEO of Mako Mining. Mako Mining has a producing mine now in the north of Nicaragua and some exciting exploration targets around the mine as well. And Akiba's going to walk you through the three things they're trying to do this year.
Sure. And if Tim is going to do a VR and videos in his presentation, I'll one-up him and actually give you a live security feed towards the end of this. But this is a picture from about 4 weeks ago. So as Deb said, we're doing three things in northern Nicaragua. We have now built what is the world's highest grade open pit mine. To date, we've mined on average about 17.5 gram material coming from the diluted vein of the mine that you see on the right. That's called San Albino. So that's what we're mining right now. And we have built what is initially scoped out as a 500 ton per day gravity and carbon and leach processing plant that you see on the left. That is now fully done. And we started to place the high grade into the mill yesterday morning. So this is a very, very near term producer in terms of what we've experienced and turned on over at San Albino. Now, the other two things that we're working on is that we made a discovery a couple of kilometers to the south of San Albino, an area called Las Conchitas. And now that we are in cash flow, the intent is to go prove out a resource over at Las Conchitas to bring it into the mine plan by the very end of next year, such that we can be mining at 1,000 tons a day by the very end of 2022. And most of the civil works to have us expand to 1,000 tons a day is already in place. We have two parallel 500 ton per day mills. With some very minor CapEx improvements, we'll be able to mine this at 1,000 tons a day, which we're fully permitted to do right now. And thirdly, and what we consider to be most importantly, is that we do think that we're sitting on an orogenic gold mining camp over here. Very, very different to the other types of geologies that you'll find in Nicaragua and frankly, even elsewhere in Central America. This is a sedimentary hosted orogenic system. We have a very, very small area of our 23 kilometers of strike length that we've prospected on our property drilled. Very, very small part of our property has been drilled. The entirety of the current San Albino resource, which is only about 270,000 ounces right now, was delineated on 230 meters of strike, but we have 2 orders of magnitude additional strike potential elsewhere on our property, which I'll go over in a bit. Now, to get us to the point that we're in right now, we've raised a total of US $61.5 million. Now, Mako does have a controlling shareholder, a private equity firm called Wexford Capital, based out of the United States. Wexford was the lead investor in 2 tranches of equity that aggregated to US $40 million, and they placed $15.5 million of the $21.5 million of debt that exists on the balance sheet of Mako right now. Now, we've experienced a few minor operating delays over the projects. Now, I think we're all sorted out. We're about a week away from declaring victory that everything is sorted out with the plant. We're probably about 5 weeks behind where we initially wanted to be from, let's say, about 5 or 6 months ago. But I do think that everything right now is working on the plant. So the cash balance is pretty tight right now. But we made our first shipment of gold the week before last, and we actually received, I should say last week, and we received payment for that this week. So while our cash balance is low, every day, or I should say every week, it's going to be increasing from now. So this was a tight balance sheet, which is now in the process of being resolved now that we actually have the plant fully operational with the high grade, with the in excess of half-ounce material now being processed through the gravity and CIL circuits over at our property. Now, Mako's operations are run by Jesse Munoz. He and his family used to own and operate a full-service engineering, procurement, and construction management firm. They've built 12 small to medium-scale mines in the Americas over the course of the last 15 or 20 years. Very, very skilled operators, and we onboarded all of the employees from Jesse's EPCM firm when the management changes of this company happened in August of 2019. So everything from Jesse, our COO, to our general manager, Arnold, used to work for Jesse, mine managers, metallurgists, project geologists. There were 12 key guys that came over to the Mako side when that management transition happened almost 2 years ago. Now, again, this is an open pit mine, and these are some of the results that we've put out over the course of the last 2 years since the management changes happened. And you can see some of the results that we've delivered, right? So let's call it September 26th. This was an infill hole over at San Albino, that mine that you saw on the initial slide of the presentation. where we hit 51 grams over 5 meters true width. That was only about 20 meters from surface. On September 4th, we hit 61 grams gold over 3 meters true width. That was 4 meters from surface. We're going to be exposing that particular area where that drill hole is located in about 6 weeks' time. So while we've mined 17.5 gram material, we happen to be in a relatively narrow part of the ore body in terms of how the geology lies. When we get into this good stuff, where we call the porcellana zone, the vein of the deposit widens out by a factor of 3, and it's actually going to be fairly easy to mine the way that we are mining. And I'll go over in a little bit about some of the very unique aspects of how we're going about mining this extremely high-grade open pit mine. Elsewhere, we've also have that exploration asset, so that currently does not have an ounce of resource named Las Conchitas. And you can see some of the results that we've put out over there. August 31st, where we hit 22 grams gold, 4.3 meters true width within a wider zone of 16 meters true width that started only a few meters from surface. Now, I don't think the average vein of our deposit is anywhere remotely like 16 meters. This happened to have been an area where that vein was duplicated, but that is the true width of that particular zone over here. So there is going to be a deposit over at Las Conchitas. We're going to be spending the better part of the next 12 months to go and infill the southern part of Las Conchitas for our initial mine plan, and then bring it into the fold at 1,000 tons a day by the very end of 2022. And then lastly, you can see some of our basic prospecting results that we've put out to areas to the north and to the northeast, inclusive on a concession that was granted by the government only last year. And you can see that we've actually extended the strike potential of this deposit for kilometers. So you can see on September 9th, ongoing reconnaissance exploration extended the strike potential of the San Albino vein an additional 6.7 kilometers. Remember, the San Albino resource was only delineated on 230 meters. And likewise, which is not on this particular slide, about a week or so ago, we put out the first prospecting results at our new granted concession, Segoviana, where we've now demonstrated some modicum of continuity across 6 kilometers of strike potential, 21 kilometers away from our producing mine right now. So Nicaragua, as Tim was going over, very good country, pretty decent roads to get access to the mine. It's about a 5.5-hour drive from the capital city of Managua. I would say within 24 months, we'll be able to hook up to the grid. So right now we're operating on gensets, but there actually is the government program to hook up to the nearest substation over the course of the next 18 to 24 months. So a really, really good level of infrastructure relative to the size of the Nicaraguan economy. The government has been fantastic. It's been a pleasure to work in. From a personal security perspective, it's a fairly easy country to deal with. We shut down and recently sold a mine in Mexico, which became problematic to be mining from a personal security perspective in those jurisdictions. So we've been very impressed with the support of the Nicaraguan government. We've been very happy to be stewards of this very important asset for the country. So a little bit about what we've mined to date. Like I said, we've pulled out about 17.5 gram gold, fully diluted. This is the functional equivalent of the head grade. And this is actually what's getting delivered to the mill as of yesterday morning. And I'll probably update the market on what's actually going through the mill sometime over the course of the next week or two. Now, a little bit about the San Albino geology and how it exists. This is a relatively narrow vein system. The average vein width within our deposit is about 1.25 meters wide. We happen to be mining a particularly narrow part of the ore body, but also a particularly high-grade part of the ore body. So when we put out this resource last year, it had a measured and indicated grade of 9.56 grams in the open pit. And we put in the press release when we put out that resource that we fully anticipate to positively reconcile to those grades because of how we are mining. So the way that we mine this 1.25 meter wide vein is not by taking conventional mining benches and scooping out everything at once. We do mine this on 6-meter benches, but we mine it half at a time, 3-meter benches at a time. And even with that, we selectively mine with an excavator by effectively scooping off the waste with very, very detailed grade control programs, such that we are mining this vein with only about 30 centimeters of tolerance on either side. The resource that was put together to have that 9.56 grams measured and indicated fully diluted grade in the open pit from Mine Development Associates last year assumed a 50 centimeter tolerance on either side of the vein. We are mining tighter than that, which is the reason we are positively reconciling. In fact, these numbers, that 17.5 gram number on a fully diluted basis positively reconciled to that resource model when we were expecting to pull out about 14.5 grams. This happened to have been a particularly high-grade part of the ore body, but also particularly narrow. This was not a 1.25 meter wide on average vein. This was more like about 70 centimeters of vein. When we get into that zone that I mentioned earlier over the course of the next 6 weeks, that vein is probably going to widen out by a factor of 3, making mining even more easy than this. Rankings of all the open pit mines in the world by grade. The second highest grade open pit mine in the world is mining at 8.5 grams a ton. Kyzyl in Kazakhstan, that has a 33-to-1 strip ratio. Currently, our project has delivered a strip ratio of about 19-to-1. Life of mine, we anticipate somewhere between 23 and 25. When you are talking about grades in excess of a half-ounce material, or in excess, let's say, of 10-gram material for a life of mine average from the vein, strip ratios of 19, of 25, of 30 are really not what is driving the economics of these deposits. Obviously, there's waste that we have to move, and it's a cost, but it's not the primary driver of whether or not an incremental ounce is profitable or not, just because the grade is delivering that kind of value of ore to our plant as we see it is right now. Now, a little bit on the exploration side. Now, this company, Mako, used to be called Golden Rain Resources. Now, Golden Rain picked up this asset in 2009. And I particularly like this chart because it really does show the story of what happened with Golden Rain and then the merger that created Mako at the end of 2018 with the management changes that happened the following year. So Golden Rain picked up this asset. They made a rediscovery of this project. It used to be a mine in the 1920s, but the rediscovery of it happened when Golden Rain picked it up in 2009. And this is a chart that shows cumulative meters drilled, the light blue being San Albino, that's the mine that we're mining right now, the dark blue being Las Conchitas, so that's the exploration asset that we're going to be bringing into production at the very end of next year, and the gray is everything else. So when Golden Rain picked this up in 2009, they made the rediscovery of San Albino and actually did a fairly extensive drill program of about 40,000 meters to deliver what at the time was about a 900,000 ounce resource that had its own flaws that we needed to correct in the updated resource from last year. The principal financier that gave Golden Rain money to do that 40,000 meter program was given a board seat in 2012. I make no secret about it. He had a different way of doing business than we do, but he did not want to invest any money in the project to advance it, to do exploration work, to engineer a deposit. He just wanted the mine to go into production, and that's what was being driven without actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting to get it to that level. The predecessor of Mako made its first investment, an affiliate of Wexford Capital, in 2014. And you can see that there was a little bit of an exploration uplift over at San Albino in 2016, simply because we demanded that they did a metallurgical program to advance the project further. There were some question marks that needed to be answered associated with it. But it wasn't until the management changes that happened in 2019 that the real drilling program started to do what effectively became a 35,000 meter infill program to get the resource that we have right now at San Albino. And then to actually start drilling over at Las Conchitas, that dark blue, only started in 2019. One of my favorite anecdotes about Las Conchitas is that the very first hole, you can see that was drilled in 2011, the very first hole, it was hole number LC11, Las Conchitas 2011, LC11-01. So literally the first hole that was put into Las Conchitas wound up hitting 3 meters of 61 gram material about 30 meters from surface. The next time that hole was followed up on was about 12 hours after I initially took over as interim CEO in 2019. And you can see the results that came from that hole. It was the first one that we released in May 6, 2019, where we hit 377 grams gold over 1 meter, 30 meters from surface and about 35 meters along strike from that discovery hole in 2011. Las Conchitas was known about for 8 years prior to this. There just was not support to do the exploration program in order to advance a second project to bring it into the fold of a San Albino mine plant. All of that got rectified 2 years ago. So even though Mako and his predecessors in one form or another has been around for since 2009, for 6.5, 7 years, this company was effectively left dormant. And right now, we've been executing our 3-stage plan, build a 500 ton per day mine, get Las Conchitas into the fold, and then to actually do what we really are here for, which is to prove that this is an orogenic gold mining camp. So that 270,000 resource, again, was only delineated in about 230 meters of strike. We've already extended the strike potential. The strike, by the way, is going in the direction of the text that you see over here to the northeast, another 6.7 kilometers. We're going to be putting the first drill holes ever outside San Albino and Las Conchitas sometime in the middle to late this summer. And then eventually we're going to have drill permits over at La Segoviana and Puerto Rios probably being towards the end of this year, and La Segoviana next year, where we can put the first drill holes over at those concessions, one of which we acquired from another company and one of which was granted by the government in early 2020, to really show that we have the ability to sustain 1,000-ton-a-day operation with a reasonable modicum of longevity. Because we really do believe that systems like this can wind up housing many, many millions of ounces of gold when all is said and done, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of capital, a lot of luck in order to prove out that type of mineral inventory. The other thing that's potentially working against us ever having a large delineated mine life is simply the morphology and how the veins themselves lie, right? So this is a shallow dipping vein structure. They dip anywhere from 0 to 30 degrees. The veins themselves are only about 1.25 meters on average, sometimes even skinnier than that. So for our ability to actually prove out a large amount of tons of ore at any given time really means we have to drill this over a very large surface area in order to prove that out. So this is always going to be a company that has a relatively short mine life on a delineated basis. Really, our objective is that now that the mine is operational, we'll have the ability to use that cash flow to go and advance the other objectives, expanding it to 1,000 tons a day, and then eventually proving out that there's additional deposits across this 23 kilometers of strike, 188 square kilometers of land that we have within our concessions, so that we can be mining at that 1,000 tons a day, really for the foreseeable future. So with that, let me see if I can actually open up what the mine is doing now. So this is what you see today, our live security feed. So let me give you a little tour of the operations. So what's being crushed right now is the high grade. So this is the stuff that's the 17.5 gram material that we pulled out over the course of the last 5 months of mining this narrow vein system that's being crushed to 3/8 of an inch. And then it's being placed in one of our two 500-ton per day mills, which should be turning right now. It's got a bad camera angle, but the one on the right is turning. So that is being milled to about 100 microns, and then it's going to be delivered into two circuits, both of which were giving us a little bit of issues over the course of the last 5 weeks. The first circuit is our gravity circuit. We have that feed going into a Nelson concentrator. We'll pull out some of the magnetic material that's coming from our grinding media over there. And then it's going to go into our refinery, which is that building that you see all the way in the back under lock and key at this point. So those gravity concentrates, which are getting concentrated from, let's say, the 15 grams that are in that pile right now, they'll get concentrated to anywhere from 5 to 15,000 grams a ton in gravity concentrates. They'll be delivered to the refinery. Now that is being placed into an intense cyanide reactor, and that was giving us a lot of issues over the course of the last month, to the point that it was very difficult for us to make a saleable button of gold for us to sell and actually generate cash. We do believe that those issues are resolved. I still have to wait for some additional data over the course of the next 24 to 36 hours. By the way, this is happening in real time, but it does really look like we've solved the issue with the concept acacia, in which case anywhere from 35% when we're dealing with relatively low-grade material to 65% when we're dealing with that good stuff that you see getting crushed right now. We'll get delivered to that acacia reactor. We'll put it through an electrowinning circuit contained within the acacia reactor, and then use that as one of our feeds to make gold. The other one, effectively the underflow to the Nelson going through our cyclones, will get delivered to our carbon and leach processing plant that you see over on the left. There's a thickener all the way in the back, and then 5 tanks that you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The high grade ore is all the way in the tank on the back. That's tank 1. And then the carbon will progress until it gets relatively less and less gold over time. So we have put in cyanide in the carbon and leach from about 3 weeks ago, but only on the first 3 tanks. We only started to put in the cyanide on tanks 4 and 5 yesterday. So right now that's kind of baking over here. And when I pull out a second, when you see the tailings, we've been actually storing tailings on the ground, which didn't contain any cyanide on that. I would say sometime this afternoon, maybe this evening, we're actually going to start storing those cyanide and detox tailings on our tailings storage facility, which I'll pull out in a second. So the other aspect of the CIL that was proving to be a challenge was our filter press. Now, this is top of the line when it comes from an environmental safety and security perspective over here. So what we do is we take the tailings, they'll be through our detox and stock tank over there. We'll press out the water to a very, very dry level of moisture, and then we will send it over here via conveyor belt to our dry stack tailings storage facility. So this is fully lined. This is an engineering equivalent of a heap leach pad, except we don't leach on this. So we just store our tailings over here. When there's contact water over here, we'll test that contact water, and then we'll have another contact pond that if needs to be detoxed even further, we'll have the ability to do that. So starting tonight, or maybe tomorrow morning, we're actually going to be stacking our first tailings in this tailing storage facility, which again shows that this mine, really in all its components, effectively turned on yesterday, right? So this is something that has been a lot of work over the course of the last 2 years to be delivered, and this week is probably the most impactful week for Mako. And then before I open up the floor to questions, let me just go over a little bit about how we're mining. So this is the San Albino hill, taking off the side of the hill. Eventually, this is going to look like a conventional pit when we get to the other side of the road. We'll expose the ore that way. Those benches that you see on the back on that, what seems to be a fairly steep wall, is actually not steep. It's only about 34 degrees, so a fairly shallow pit wall. Those are 6-meter mining benches, entirely conventional on how those are developed. But we don't mine 6 meters at once. You can see a half of that bench is being mined at any given time. So that's a 3-meter mining bench at any given time. Blast holes will sample every meter down hole to give us an understanding of grade. Likewise, when we expose the face on section, we will sample every 4 meters with a geologist in a channel sample to process in our lab. That will give a good indication as to what the grades are. We'll mark it, also very good visual separation. We'll mark the contact points between the vein, hanging wall, footwall, and country rock with a can of blue spray paint. We'll scoop off the waste, and then we will mine those veins only with 30-centimeter tolerances on either side, which is the reason why we can positively reconcile to the resource model. It's the reason why we can mine 75-centimeter wide veins like we are right now. They happen to be particularly high grade in this particular area, really in a commercial capacity. We've been at 500 tons per day plus of ore material. That's the diluted vein material and some historical dumps that the old timers left over that is economic. We've been mining well in excess of 500 tons a day over the course of the last 7 or 8 weeks. And then when we get to the good stuff, which is actually towards the right over here, sometime in the next 6 or 7 weeks, that kind of road area that goes down, that's when the vein starts opening up at very similar levels. So instead of mining maybe 500 tons a day of ore, there are going to be days where we're going to be mining well in excess of 1,000 tons of half-ounce material coming from this mine when we get to that porcelana zone. Truly, truly unique in terms of how we're mining it. By the way, it's a local contractor that's doing it under our supervision, so it was great to train this group on how to mine what really is a mining technique that I'm not aware of being employed elsewhere, and we're doing it very well. I can't be happier with how the mine has been performing over the course of the last 3 months. And then the plant that you see over there, even though it had some teething issues that we needed to address over the course of the last 5 weeks, I do think that all of those teething issues are behind us. And then we have an operational gold mine that the intent is to expand it over the course of the next 18 months. And then most importantly, to prove that we can actually find a lot more of these deposits on our 188 square kilometer land package.
So I have a couple questions that relates to your last statement. So earlier you said something that I haven't heard you say before, which is you've talked about Las Conchitas and having a maiden resource next year. You actually indicated that you might think you might be in a position to start mining there at the end of next year. Did I mishear that?
It's what I said. I think it's also consistent with what I said, nor do I think it's contradicting. So I do think we're going to have a maiden. we are going to, by the way, we operate
sometimes, Akiba.
Right. We are going to have a maiden resource on that, probably in the first half of the next year. Right. Right now, in terms of internal models, we have the bones of a three-dimensional model in place over Las Conchitas. If we wanted to put out an inferred resource on that tomorrow, we could. It's only going to be focused on the bottom third of Las Conchitas. So that thing that cuts that pink area in half, that's the Candelaria Creek. So to the right of Candelaria Creek, but on the southern third of this, we'll focus on three of the nine developed targets over Las Conchitas for what will be a relatively be almost an identical situation that happened to San Albino that kind of freaked people out last year, is that we do a lot of work to actually prove out a resource, because guess what? This is a mining company. We have to have a mine that is predictable, because we are not in the market of trying to BS people in terms of what the size of our resource is. We have to mine it and deliver it because we are in operations in addition to being an explorer. But the resource will come out in the first half. And then our intent really is to be mining that at the very, 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 like Christmas time, 2022 for next year.
So I did hear you accurately. That's exciting. So a related question, what is the expected life of mine for this project? And I know it's kind of a two-part answer. Yeah,
this is the thing that is going to, and Mako's been controversial, right? Since for a long time, like even before me, and then even with me, I tend to be a controversial person in its own right. But there are legitimate controversies about Mako. We are never going to have a long delineated mine life because of not geology, because of geometry. It's like you can't drill this to the levels of specification and satisfaction, frankly, that we need in order to get a mineable resource on this that we can build a mine plan around, given the fact that these veins are shallow dipping, they're relatively narrow, so it takes a while to build up tonnage when you're dealing with narrow veins. And then also, there are morphology issues over here where they pinch and swell, they move out all over the place. San Albino happens to be, if anything, the most well-controlled of our veins. Some of our other veins are kind of like head scratchers when you're trying to put together a resource. It requires a lot of drilling. There's always going to be investors that will be there and say, I need to have a certain number of ounces to invest in it. It's never going to be a long delineated mine life. That is a very different statement than saying that there doesn't exist a long mine life over here. It just requires many, many tens of thousands of meters of drilling in order to prove this out over time. This is something that is going to be relatively short, but the idea is to reinvest in the deposit, in the district, in order to prove out additional resources over the course of the 23 kilometers of effectively untested strike. There hasn't been a drill hole that was put in outside of San Albino and Las Conchitas, even though we've done very extensive prospecting, which demonstrates that this system, if anything, it's going off our property in either direction.
Will future mining operations be put out for bid, or is there a partnership in place with current local contractor for all future expansion?
So from who is mining this, it was great to work with Conchitas, who's actually a local person from El Jicaro. So great to have employees working for us there to train him on how to do mining, and even for things that have transferable skills. So we train mechanics and engineers. They want to work for Mako over the course of the next 5 years. Great. If they want to work in Managua, go to engineering school to become an engineer, great as well. This is actually very, very good to advance the community. In terms of formal relationships with any other companies, or even in our artisanal mining, there doesn't exist. Now, Nicaragua, you do need to set aside 1% of your prospective claims to registered artisanal miners who don't use heavy equipment. And for the registered artisanal miners, it's great. If anything, like that Segoviana press release that we put out last week, a lot of that prospecting information initially came from artisanal miners that we were talking to 20 kilometers away from the mine. They gave us ideas, we give them ideas, and then over time you develop a relationship with them. So we're happy to work within the confines of what the the government concession requirements are. But there are no formal relations on the mining side with any other company or group.
Okay, there are a couple questions left, but I'll take them up with you offline if that's okay. Keep it to stick within the time frame. Thanks for the update. Really exciting times.
Appreciate it, Deb. All right, thank you.